Welcome to Make Your Mark podcast, where guests share their experiences, insights, and tactics to help you accelerate your business. So building, scaling, and monetizing your business is made easier. And I will be your host, Suthar. Oh my goodness, guys. I have such an exciting guest for you today. He is a #1 best-selling author of Living the Life of Your Dreams, working to help people stop working insane hours and live the life that they dream of. He is here today to share with us how to break through terror barriers and scale to 7 figures. And guess what, guys? In half the time, right? Please welcome Dan Lafave. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for you to be here today, Dan.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Kay.
No worries. Now, you have quite a bit of an interesting story, right? And the journey that you've gone through. And I want to dive into that a little bit deeper in a moment. But please explain to us where you was at before you even transitioned in the life of business.
Well, I guess you could say I was just trying to find my footing, and so I actually got thrown into it in some respect because I graduated from university. I didn't know what to do. I ended up taking a job on a construction site, driving a backhoe. And then, but then, I went, from that to working in an office, working in a financial investment office, working for the #1 broker in an office. And then, and I remember being on the phone, talking to them about this position. I'm basically in like a container with a desk and a phone, like one of those shipping containers.
Right. Okay.
But anyway, I negotiated my way into that, but that didn't really suit me. And anyway, I was there for a couple of years, and my brother was building a business at that time in wireless telecommunication construction, so building rooftop sites and towers and stuff. And but anyway, I started talking with him. He was just getting started. I joined him. I was working in the field, learning how to build these things, and 2 weeks later, I sprained my thumb severely, and then I ended up in the office. Well, from then on, I organized the business, I organized the finances, I dealt with the banks, and again, I'm a 20-something-year-old guy. I don't know what I'm doing, and I remember making profit and loss statements, projections, just like, and this is in the 90s. Like I found a spreadsheet online, and I just made it up, So,
Okay. As you do, right? When you're younger, just trying to kind of find your feet and trying to figure it all out. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how did you feel when you were like put into these spots and had to figure it out? Did you feel like, oh my goodness, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. How am I going to do this? Let me just run, right? Well, what was the mindset that was going through your mind and trying to kind of figure all this stuff out at such a young age?
Well, I'm just, I'm a resourceful person, so I'm solution oriented. So I knew the bank needed some statements of some kind. And so I just said, okay, well, I'll give them something and hopefully they accept it. And that's the way I approached it, because I'm always somebody who has an attitude that I can solve a problem or I can figure things out. And I don't know, if that was put inside of me before I was born or whether I learned it, but I just have that kind of mentality. So I remember I just did these financial statements, and we basically went from maybe $200,000 a year to $400,000 to $600,000 to $1 million in 3 years. And it was just like, startup, create chaos, and we're just figuring things out. And I'm just, flying by the seat of my pants. My brother's spending money like crazy, buying trucks and everything, like buying, $75,000 trucks. And my perception is like, let's just start off small, but he went big. And, but in the end, it wasn't a good fit. And I ended up, looking at other options, and I went and met a friend of a friend who was working at a telecommunications company, a big, multi-billion-dollar company. And I got a call one day, and they were offering me a project management position to manage a $25 million project. And
how old were you at that point?
I was in my late 20s, like I was around probably 27, 28, somewhere there. And so I said yes, why wouldn't I, you know,
Right.
like I was in a situation of pain, like my brother's spending money like crazy and I'm trying to pay bills. And there were times I didn't pay myself, you know. He got paychecks, but I didn't, because I was aware of the accounting, I didn't pay myself. And so anyway, but, I just said, okay, we're not aligned. He's spending money like crazy. He's not going to give me partner ownership. And there was all sorts of complexities. But in the end, I went over and I did that project. That lasted a little while. And then I was invited to, or not invited, but I was told that that position was ending because this company was bought by a much larger company. And so I went searching for another opportunity because, again, I'm resourceful. I went and met with somebody that does real estate for another big telecom company. And he said, we need to hire you. and so again, on contract. And so I was hired on contract. I did real estate negotiations. Didn't know that. And I learned that. I mean, I was negotiating with condo board members, and these are retired bankers and financial guys, and they're super lawyers and like intelligent, like way more intelligent than I am. But I was negotiating with them and winning, and so but I did that, and then the final step I took was I went and worked for the largest landlord in Canada, and they had commercial revenue, and they gave me 3 streams of revenue, and I was doing so well that within a year or two, the CFO said, "You come into my office. I want you to manage all streams of revenue for this department," which is eight streams of revenue. And at that time, it was probably 15 to 20 million in revenue. And I said, "Yeah, sure. Thank you." And so I did that, and I took it to $24 million. Since then, it's still growing. It's like 30, 40 million. I talked to some of the folks that are there. But I built up systems and processes, real estate database. I didn't build it, but I hired people. And but I'm just, I'm very good at that. But then I had an opportunity to take a parental leave, because this was a quasi-government organization, and they said you can take 36 weeks off at about 90% pay, and and guess what? That was my second son. My first son, I had no idea about this. I didn't even know about it. I remember taking 2 weeks vacation when my first son was born, and I worked at home the whole time. And so, but the second time, I said, "Thank you. I'm going. I've earned my dues. I'm out of here." And I took that leave. But then when I went to go back, I had the awakening, and I realized, the 3 hours of commuting every day, and a boss who works all hours and expects, he was projecting 6% revenue increase one year, and he didn't even tell me, like, how am I supposed to accomplish that, if I don't know? But I beat it, right? And so. But that's the thing. So then I had that awakening. I was really disenchanted, didn't want to be there. And a recruiter contacted me, and I ended up going to another company, smaller company. They were maybe doing like $11 million or so, or whatever. Smaller company. I went to them, and I was still feeling the same. And there was some mix up there in terms of the expectations. But within 3 months, they called me into the boardroom and they said, "You're fired." And that's the first time in my life ever.
What?
I'm always first hired, last fired, right?
What?
So
What happened? Why did they
well,
fire you?
it was just in terms of the expectations, it wasn't very clear, and they had 2 people that were going to be working with me, in like I was going to be leading that group. And when I started, they said, "This individual has got just went and got a real estate license. They're leaving." And I said, "Oh, fantastic! So you're going to fill that position?" Nope. And then anyway, it was just not aligned, but also it was an indication for me to get out. I didn't fit in that industry anymore. I did a lot. I did construction, real estate negotiations, project management. I understood all aspects of that business, and I could still do it today. And people would probably see me in the room and be a little paranoid because they know that I know everything. Right. I know all sides of the business, right? Like, it's fun sitting in a room when you're talking to VPs and they're big telecom companies, and I'm the landlord, and I'm just like, "Guys, here's the price, and I know what you're going to ask for and why, and we're not going to agree. So either we play at the level that we need to, or."
A couple of things there that I've actually realized about you. First of all, you don't have the word no in your vocabulary. You say yes to every opportunity that comes your way, right? And also, you're not scared to learn on the job, right? A lot of people, I feel like they can't take that next step because they need to learn, they need to prepare, and to make sure that they know everything about that particular thing before they go ahead and jump. And you were just like, yeah, I'll do that, and you just figured it out on the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like growing wings on a plane as you're flying it, or growing wings on the way down. Jump and grow wings, and that's
Right.
it.
And that's where you kind of built your experience, your knowledge, your skills by actually doing it in the job,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is amazing. Now, I do know that you was in a really serious accident. And 3 people lost their lives, and you was in a coma, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, that's when you realize, hold on a second, I've been given a second chance. Tell us a little bit about that. What happened there?
Well, just to give context, I think I was around 7 years old. I'm pretty confident. I was absolutely certain, but it was a time when we were playing hockey. My brother and I were playing hockey, and we were going to a hockey tournament, and basically a drunk driver hit us head on. And, the driver died. The 2 people in the front seat, the parents of the boy beside me, which was my brother's friend, perished immediately. And I landed in a coma. So I was, a few days out, completely out. My perception was that I was being reset in some respect, and frankly, it did happen, or I was reset in some respect, because I lost a lot of my memories. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. Is kind of, it's fuzzy and gray areas and just little snippets here and there. But most children can remember, they're maybe 4, 5, 6 years old or something like that. But those times are kind of gray. So anyway, it was a real shocker, but it made me more aware. I started looking at life differently, asking different questions.
Even at that young age.
Yeah, I mean, I remember kind of looking out at the world and thinking, what's what's this all about, or what's my purpose, or things like that. And I remember, watching for my father to come home, so I became more aware and conscious of life and how fragile it is. And I remember this so clearly. I would sit at the front window in our living room, look out the window, and I could tell when a car turned the corner way down the street because the lights would reflect off of my neighbor's garage door. And I remember that so clearly that I knew there was a car coming. So I was like, okay, I just saw some lights reflecting off the garage door. I know there's a car coming, and it could be my dad. And I would watch for him to come home. And because my dad had his own business, he was a butcher, and he had a meat shop about a half an hour drive away. But I wanted to see him safely home because I just had a huge wake up,
Yeah, so there was loads of fear there, I guess, that was embedded after the experience that you went through. And you did actually mention, I saw somewhere where there was a lot of doubt that you were having to battle, and a lot of fear. And so what did some of those look like, and how did you overcome some of them, or all of them?
Well, the thing is, I've learned that doubt is the father of fear. And, over time I've learned that, but I didn't know that back then. But, there's a lot of, emotions around what happened and, what I'm capable of. And, so I think that the key thing was that I don't know that I feared death because I sort of just, sidestepped it. But I because I practically wasn't fearful of anything. Like I would jump off of rooftops into a pile of sand or something like that, in a new development or something like that, but yeah, I'd climb trees and, hang from hydro lines and stuff. But I think that, the fear and doubt comes from, not necessarily doing things that are unfamiliar, but doing things that, that I guess that I don't know enough about, or that maybe it's related to, the challenges that I ran into, after having that accident and so on, and not really, I didn't even have time to recover. Maybe a couple weeks at home, and that was it. And there was no therapy, no nothing, just so,
Really? Oh,
yeah.
wow. So
So
you went straight back to school afterwards?
that's it. Yeah, thrown right back into school, bloodshot eye, scars all over my head, and maybe some stitches and things like that. But yeah, so but yeah, I mean, throughout my life, I've had fears and doubts. Maybe not necessarily at a young age, but fears and doubts. They're normal. But there's things that I had to muster up the strength and the energy to do, that got to me where I am. Like I probably had fears and doubts around going to the university, but because of that car accident and because of interest rates and inflation, I was able to afford to go to university, and I paid for it myself. So,
Oh, that's super cool. Okay, I see. Now, I really want to kind of dive in deep as to, how you actually bring back time for people so they can actually enjoy their lives. And you are very, you've got a mindset of like an engineer, operations, strategies, right? And taking it step by step. And this is how you help a lot of your clients. So tell me a little bit about, some of the clients that you've worked with where they're working all the hours that they can and not actually enjoying lives. What are you seeing that most people are struggling with or making, common mistakes with?
well, this current reality is about just people having some sort of balance or some sort of security. And so, a lot of people are in sort of a mode that they're trying to figure things out right now. And, safety and security is really high on the list of things that they need. So, in terms of what I do is I look at people's lives from a sense of, time, because, like I think that pain management is time management. Like if you manage what you're doing, not necessarily managing time, because we don't control that. So it's like, how do we manage our actions so that, we look back on today and say, well, I did the things that I feel good about, or I feel proud about. Like pride is really a really powerful force if people can just get into, understand that. And so let's say you set intentions for the day, and the intention is to have some joy and fun with family and get some things done for business and maybe some other things. But if you set those intentions and at the end of the day you assess it and say, yeah, I checked those boxes off. I did them. I'm feeling good. It gets a dopamine feedback loop going inside of our neurotransmitters. Yeah, and then we feel good, and then we're like, okay, I can do this again tomorrow, and or something like it. But the key factor is we don't control two things: birth and death. We control what comes in between, and we also only control our thoughts. There's nothing else we control outside of that. So let's work with our thoughts. And I've learned from people like Louise Hay, who started Hay House, that, our feelings are thoughts moving through our body. So if we want to feel good, well, let's pick some really good thoughts.
Sounds so simple, right?
Yeah. Well, it is in a sense. I mean, if you've heard of affirmations, those are powerful thoughts. You can say all sorts of wonderful things about yourself and what you want, and really just take over what's going on, because we have a hard drive in our mind, which is our subconscious, and it's running the show. I mean, you don't have to breathe. You don't have to try to breathe. You don't have to try to blink or digest food or anything. That's all happening for us. It's all automatic. So there's a lot of automatic things happening, but also guess what else is automatic? Our old beliefs, habits, patterns of thoughts. Those were given to us when we couldn't even say no. We couldn't reason. So guess what? We go around repeating them, and then we look at our life and we say, this sucks. I don't know why. And how do I fix it? Well, you fix it by injecting new thoughts of the future and possibility and potentiality, and managing your time so that you're only focusing on things that matter. Because at the end of the day, if you didn't do those things and you don't feel good, guess what? You go to sleep with that, and your mind will percolate and marinate on that.
So what kind of steps do you think people should put in place in order to be able to manage their time? Because I think a lot of people struggle in this area, and they probably think, it's impossible with maybe, looking after kids and school drops and pickups and then, working and whatever it may be. And then, start trying to build your own business and dealing with your team and managing all of that. Like, how is that even possible to fit all of that in a day?
Well, the key is systems. Systems are the solutions. We know that. I mean, we have financial systems, medical systems. We have all sorts of systems in the world that keep us calm and organized and so on and happy in our environments. Like if we didn't have power, we wouldn't have electricity, we wouldn't be talking, right? No internet, right? So we have all these systems, but we need to have systems within our lives as well so that we can manage things better. And so if you take a systems approach, which like you said earlier, I like reverse engineering things. So I look at things and say, okay, I want this outcome. That's the goal. All right. So now how do I get there? And then we start thinking backwards and say, well, what do I need to do? What does it need to look like? What kind of perspective would I need to have? Because perspective matters. I mean, if we look at a situation and say, oh, this is impossible, well, then, that's going to be true, right? Henry Ford said, whether you think it's right or wrong or good or bad, it will be, right? And so it's about intention, have an intention, which is having a goal, because then you have a future vision of yourself. If you don't have a future vision, guess what? We're only thinking about what's here now, which is basically a reflection of the past, which means your future is predictable. And that's a problem. Most people do that. They start where they know and they reflect on their past and then they try to build something on that. You can't do that. Like a wake behind a boat can't drive the boat. So
right. Okay. And so, I mean, what kind of steps should people take, or what systems should they implement to put into place to make sure they are spending their time where it should be, rather than spending time on things and tasks that they shouldn't be doing?
Well, they should have something that they can measure their performance. So, and I'm going to give something. I'm going to give a gift here, so I'll let the cat out of the bag. But it's a 12-week planning system, because you can accomplish a lot in 12 weeks. But if you focus on it, like really have focus and clarity on it, and measure performance, because what you measure grows and it will expand. You've heard about, your energy goes where your attention, or your energy goes where your attention flows, or vice versa. So you need to have something that you can do that with. So I've created this 12-week planning system based on the book, The 12-Week Year. And it's a way of setting your objectives, but also having what I call key motivators, which are the things that pull on your emotional heartstrings. Because if you do not have something that's emotional, because the emotions drive us, like we know that. When you buy a car, it's an emotional buy, right? So we need to have something that's emotionally pulling on us, but also something that is pulling us forward towards our goal, but also something that's pushing us. So we need a push and a pull. The push is the fear of failing, the fear of going back to some experience in the past. That's why you see people that succeed. They were like, I was living in a trailer with my dad. Never again. Right? And, yeah. And so you need the push and the pull. And once you have that push and pull, then you have a contrast, and then you have conflict. So, but if you have a system like this 12-week planning system, you create your objectives, you have your intentions, you have your key motivators, and then all you're doing is building tactics to get there. And the tactics are things that you can control, nothing else. Why would you put something down that you can't control and then not be able to check it off? That's a plan for failure. So you need to have a system like that for setting your objectives, measuring performance. And I focus on business, health, and relationships. Those are the three major categories, three pillars. So if you're not focusing on those.
Is that your categories, or should that be categories for everybody?
That's categories for everybody, because if you think about it, at some point in life, we're all going to look back on our lives. And if we don't look back with fond memories, then that's because we didn't build strong relationships. And, a lot of people have successful businesses, but not successful business owners with successful families. Usually the families are left at the bottom. So you want to have strong relationships so you can look back and remember all the things that got you there, but also people surrounding you that are supporting you. And also, if you don't have health, everything crumbles. That's like a stack of cards ready to crumble. So you need to have your health. And also anybody who's scaling the business, and I work with people that are scaling, they need to have more energy to put into the business to scale. So every single one of my clients has actually got leaner and lighter. One gentleman lost 36 pounds, like just, and it wasn't even really a focus, but it was just part of the process. And because he organized his mind and his life, and he realized, and just by sheer fact that we were doing this work, he needed to get more energized to manage his business better so that he could have more time with his family. So it's all interconnected. Build the business that fuels, have the health so you can build your business, and then the business that fuels your freedom for your relationships. It's all dialed in.
Question on that, Dan. Do your clients, or do any of us, have to focus on each one of them separately, or do we focus on all of them together?
You focus on them together, but here's what happens. It's an intentional imbalance at the beginning. Why? The business needs the most, the focus. If you're going to get that business off the ground, it needs a lot of fuel, a lot of energy. So intentional imbalance, what I often see because we don't have more than 3 tactics per week. So only 3 tactics. Why? Because if you have 3 or more, you have none. There's a great saying, so 3 there, but the health can be 1 and the relationships can be 1. What happens with my clients is they have this realization. I didn't do the little thing that I said I would do for myself, for my health. I didn't take the time for my spouse or my children. And then they have this self-realization and they're like, wow, I am not living a life like I thought I would be. But they don't realize it until we're charting it and mapping it and measuring it. And then the shift happens. They're like, I got to build a business that gives me these things. And then they get really fired up and then they get it done. And then like Alice, who went from 12-hour days to 12-hour weeks and bored, like that's a pretty neat shift, right?
Yeah.
So.
Oh my goodness. So going from like constantly working to all of a sudden having so much time that you're bored out of your head, that is completely opposites, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens there then? What happened with that client where all of a sudden they had all this time, they were completely bored? Did they have to then figure out, okay, what are you going to do spending that time now? What fulfills them? What else can they do?
Well, there were 2 things about Alice. She was actually pregnant the whole time I was working with her. So she had something to go to immediately. She basically was going to have a child within a few weeks. And so she had that going for her, but also she's very hardworking, very business oriented. So now here's an opportunity for business development. So once she said that, because she hadn't had her child yet, I said, well, now we shift gears. We do more business development. How are you going to expand your business? Are you going to invest in other businesses? And she already was. She was doing some e-commerce stuff because that's where her passion was. She did that plus real estate investments. So plus she was a web developer. So, so she had a number of things going on, but when you have the time and space now that you can devote it to something else that's your passion. We even were building her dungeon, or her cave. I guess, she called it her cave. It was in her basement in her house, and she was building this cave, which is basically her central system, for interacting with clients and so on. She was even building workstations for her child that was going to be born, plus other ones. And so then they could work in that environment. She had a soundproof room that she was designing. And so there was all this future thinking about, okay, if her business is going to grow and she's going to interact with people and she's going to do the things she loves, what does that look like? And how can she design the space so she can do it?
Yeah. So. And what I'm hearing there is that extra time that you've now given her has allowed her to get even creative. Right? And think of so many other things, I guess, she may not have thought of because she was working in her business and not on her business previously. Right? Yeah. So that is pretty cool. And she's creating her own cave. I've never heard of that term before, but that sounds really interesting. Her own cave, her own dungeon. So that's pretty cool. So is there any last words you have for our audience today?
Well, just know this. This is one, I have a few different perspectives, which is life isn't happening to you, it's responding to you. So look for the evidence that's being reflected back to you in your life. Everything is a feedback loop. Just like there's dopamine feedback loop in our mind, there's feedback loop in our world. If we keep seeing the same experiences and having the same frustrations, guess what? there's a pattern of thought that's leading to that, and so feedback loop. So paying attention to that matters, but also if you're ever in a bind, get your thoughts out of your head. There's talk therapy, right? Thoughts become untangled as they pass through your lips and over fingertips. So as you write and you speak, you get your thoughts untangled. And that's something I'm a pro at. I do mind maps with my clients, and every time they get off the call, they say to me, I would have never thought about these solutions. I said, but you did, because I pulled them out of your head. and now they have a pathway out. So that's critical, that people have to realize they have more power than they think. And all I have to do is get their thoughts out on paper or someplace where they can look at them and realize, all right, I've got a situation here, but I can solve it and I can get out of it. And there's always a way out. There's always a way out. You just have to be willing to find it and work towards it. And just also remember this too. When emotions are high, intelligence is low. So if you're emotional about something, don't try to solve anything. Because guess what? Your intelligence is way low. It's pushed down. It's like you don't think straight. That's why when people argue, especially spouse, partnerships and husband and wife, they argue. Emotions are high. They say anything. And then afterwards, it's like, oh man, how do I take that back?
Right. That's exactly the case. Amazing. Now, I know there's one last question. People are probably thinking, oh my goodness, how do I get hold of Dan? Where do we go to connect with him? And where can they get your 12-week program?
Well, certainly. Well, I made it easy. So I'm the 12-week planner. It's not necessarily a program, but it's a planner. And there's a sequence of messages that will help you build this. And I have nothing to sell you unless you're a digital marketing agency. But take it and use it. I put it together. I'm happy to give it to you. So it is at lafavecoaching.com/free focus, because you want to have free focus. And it's a focus productivity planner, and it is. But I will tell you, it's not friendly. It's not fun. It's going to push you.
But
and I would,
results, right?
Yeah. And I would design it with your focus, your future focus in mind, and then get an accountability partner, not somebody close to you either, somebody who can really be honest and be truthful with you. But yeah, it's lafavecoaching.com/free focus. And then if they want to check out my website, lafavecoaching.com, they can do that too. There's remove the free focus and take a look there. But it's all, just like you, I have a real passion for helping people and for helping them move forward, see the better side of themselves, do what they're capable of doing, allow their mind to do what it's capable of doing, and allow their business to grow as big as it's capable of growing.
There you go. Awesome. Guys, and all the links that Dan has mentioned will be in the show notes. So make sure you scroll down and take a look there if you've missed it. Please go ahead and contact Dan. Find out what he's doing. Download that planner, that 12-week planner, right? And get yourself started and get it implemented in your business right now. You want to be in a position where you're not working in your business, you're working on your business, and you want to maybe, get creative, maybe be bored as well because of all this extra time that you've got for yourself, and start developing and creating even more bigger, better things in your business. So thank you so much, Dan, for coming on board and giving so many different nuggets here. They're all really, really awesome. Everything that's coming out of your mouth is just value after value after value. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kay. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.